Hello everyone and welcome back to the final chicane with me, Kristen Boylan. Welcome back everyone. What are we on now? The third race after the summer break? Azerbaijan weekend. I'll start by saying that I am a little under the weather, so I'm sure you might be able to hear that in my voice, and I apologise for that. I don't know, I started back at college last week and my immune system was not prepared to be surrounded by all those people and the bus as well. Girlie, if only you passed your driving test, I would be probably perfectly healthy right now. We're doing fine. Bit of water, bit of lime sip, and we're good to go. Azerbaijan, did it bring what I thought it would bring this weekend? No. It brought a lot. It brought some good driving, brought some good competition between, I guess, the people that we would have least expected at the start of the season, Oscar and Charles, Ferrari and McLaren. And yeah, it didn't bring as much drama as I think most of us were expecting, but we'll talk about that later. Right now, like always, we'll start with Riddle of the Week. I had daring skill and a passion vast, yet my victory came when my time had passed. I raced at Le Mans and conquered fast, in a lotus my legacy was cast. A champion crowned for all to see, who am I in F1 history. So, who is that? Quite an iconic figure in Formula 1. Like always, I will tell you the answer and the story behind this person at the end of today's episode. So, speaking of today's episode, let's start. Let's get into it. Actually, before we get into it, I know that I don't think I gave my YouTube or Spotify listeners a warning about the giveaway I was doing. I know if you're just on Spotify and not on any other social media, you probably couldn't really partake in it, but you could on YouTube. And I just wanted to thank everyone for taking part. The winner was picked yesterday, Amy McEntee, if she's listening. If she is listening, I actually spelt her name wrong when I was putting in the delivery information. I said McEntee, I think. So I apologise for that. But yeah, it was really nice. I did a live stream when I was picking the winner yesterday, and it was nice to talk to fellow Formula 1 fans and discuss the Azerbaijan Grand Prix last week. So I think I might do a live stream like maybe every Sunday, or like every Sunday after a race when there is a race. If you're interested in that, would that be fun? Let me know. My TikTok is Kristen Boylan X. Anyway, if that's something you want to do. And I made my first profit from, well, I wouldn't call it a profit because of what I've spent, but I made my first money from my TikTok, well, from my Formula 1 social media presence in general. Guess how much money I made? I made 9/10 of a cent. Like, guys, I'm bringing in the big bucks now. Like, I'll be buying a Lamborghini next, so I'm saving up. Actually, no, I wouldn't buy a Lamborghini. Do you know what my dream car is? I actually don't know what it's called, so it's probably not my dream car. But have any of you ever watched Teen Wolf? Probably not. Styles Stilinski's car. It's sort of like Jeep Wrangler vibes. Light blue. Has to be light blue. But like smoother than a Jeep Wrangler. Like less, like more old fashioned. That's my dream car. That's the car I want, and that's the car I will get one day. But yeah, thanks for everyone who joined the giveaway. Obviously, there'll be another giveaway soon, hopefully, once I reach 2k subscribers on YouTube. And once I hit my next milestone on Spotify, I will be partnering with another small business in Formula 1 for another giveaway, which is worldwide, obviously. And yeah, keep an eye out for all of that stuff. Now, we should probably actually talk about the Azerbaijan Grand Prix in Baku. Media moments. So obviously the biggest media moment to come from this entire week was that Adrian Newey is announced to go to Aston Martin as managing technical director. This wasn't really a surprise. We've sort of heard about this being a possibility in especially the past month. It became more than just a rumour. Aston Martin seem very, very excited to have him, Lawrence Stroll especially. And one thing that Aston Martin made clear is that they want Max on the team. They said the door is always open for Max, and maybe that will look more favourable with how Red Bull are sort of taking their dip right now. And Adrian Newey, who Max obviously has a great relationship with now in Aston Martin, I don't know. maybe something to keep an eye out on. I don't think Max is going anywhere next year, but I think 2026 might be an interesting year for some swap arounds. Obviously, depending on how Red Bull do and if they get back on their game. Staying with Red Bull, obviously we've been seeing their problems recently, and Perez sort of furthered the idea that these are the problems that he's been experiencing all year with the trajectory of the development of the Red Bull, basically, is what he was saying the problem is. And now people are only noticing because Max is having problems. Obviously, as soon as Max wasn't getting pole or whatever, it wasn't, oh my god, has Max lost it? It was definitely, yeah, the car is the issue. And Perez actually was a step ahead of Max all weekend, this weekend, which was very interesting. Obviously, he's a Baku hero, sort of. He just comes alive at Baku for some reason. So I don't know if it's just to do with how good he is at driving at Baku, or if the car, maybe now the development of it is getting more suited to Perez, or whatever. Not, maybe even not on purpose, just the way it is developing, maybe more to Perez's driving style. But yeah, obviously what could have been an incredible weekend for Perez unfortunately did not end that way. Team orders for McLaren were the next sort of topic. So McLaren confirmed that Lando would be given the priority in team orders from now on. That Oscar's role is obviously do the best he can, but also to support Lando in Lando's fight for the championship. Oscar, of course, said he'll help out. He'll follow the team orders. This is what he'll do. But it's not that easy for him, being where he is, to have to sort of be pushed aside for Lando. Now, from a team perspective, obviously, team orders do make sense. It's more of a difficult situation because of how close Lando and Oscar are, and how sometimes one of them might be having the best weekend of their career and the other might be having a bad weekend, so it's constantly up and down for them. So I don't think it is the easiest decision to make. I don't necessarily think it's the wrong decision, because letting teammates fight, as we know from the past, most of the time just doesn't always work out the best. And I guess we can discuss team orders after this weekend later on in today's episode and see if we think there might be a bit of a change to that. Kevin Magnussen got his race ban for this weekend, so Ollie Behrman is replacing him. He obviously had to get the go-ahead from Ferrari because he's Ferrari's reserve driver, and Ferrari gave him that go-ahead, which very good for Haas to see, to test him out, because obviously he'll be in the car full-time for Haas next year. He did not disappoint at all this weekend. He did not disappoint at any point. He's been in a Formula 1 car so far this year. So I wonder if Haas are sort of like, should we try get him for another race? Or probably not. I don't know if Ferrari would allow that though, because he's a good driver. He's shown that if he needs to step in for Charles or Carlos, like he's still capable of getting points, and getting quite a lot of points so far. So they might not want to risk losing that, but also that would be a horrible thing to do to Magnussen, because he has a contract, and obviously contracts can always be broken, but that would be a bit messy for Haas if they wanted to do that. But no, I'm excited to see Magnussen back in Singapore for his last few races with Haas, and Hulk as well. Obviously he's leaving Haas at the end of the season as well, going to be replaced by Esteban Ocon and Ollie Behrman as teammates. One media moment that I was expecting was Daniel to be harassed with questions about his future and his contract, because he was in the press conference for the first time in quite a while this weekend on Media Day on Thursday. And for some reason, which is actually more sus to me than anything else, is that he was not asked about his contract. He was not asked about next year. Like, do the media know something that we don't? And I don't know if that's a good sign for Daniel fans or not. Because one thing I've noticed, I think we've all noticed from Daniel since the summer break, is that he seems a bit more calm about his future. Whenever he's asked about it, he sort of changes the subject. Like, he was asked about, if that race was important and if it's frustrating that he didn't score points when he's trying to secure his future, and he sort of just changed the subject to talk about Yuki and how disappointing it was that unfortunately Yuki was in that mess that ended up in a DNF, and he was just sort of, chatting positively about Yuki instead. But does that mean that he's not worried about his future next year, or that he's made peace with his future next year? Maybe just trying to live in the present. I don't know. I hope not. I'd very much like to see Daniel in Formula 1 next year. But yeah, and Christian was asked about it, obviously. His response was sort of the same thing that he's been saying for a while. He was like, Perez is showing signs of improvement. And then when asked what Daniel's future is next year, he said, you'll have to ask Laurent Mecchi. That's a bit weird to me because Laurent doesn't have the complete say over Daniel's future. Laurent is the Visa Cash App or B team principal. We all know the power there lies with Christian Horner. So Laurent said that it is important for them that Visa Cash App or B is sort of seen as a team for rookies, like a support team. They want to be able to do that. But then Peter Bayer from Visa Cash App or B said that that's not really the case, and that, you know, he sort of went against what Laurent said. So I think there's a bit of confusion going on at Visa Cash App or B. And why I'm talking about this is because Sunday was the break of Liam Lawson's contract. So Liam Lawson, we don't know. He's either officially not associated with Red Bull anymore, or else he was given another contract. Do I think he really has a lot of options outside of Red Bull? Not for next year, but he could for the year after. He might not want to sign with them again if he feels like he's not going to get a chance. But I don't see him wanting to leave. I would say Liam, if he's signed for next year, that's already done. And they're just waiting to announce it or not. And Helmut said that the announcement on the V-Carb seat will come either before or after Singapore, or during Singapore weekend, I guess. And that is this weekend. Because I want to see Liam in Formula 1. And I want to see Daniel in Formula 1. And I want to see Yuki in Formula 1. And I want to see Checo in Formula 1. So you can see how conflicting this may be. It's okay. What happens, happens. And yeah, just a small change to the actual physical track this year. The DRS zone was expanded by 100 metres, which was supposed to make overtaking easy. We did see a lot of overtaking during this race. So not easy, but easier. So yeah, I think that's all of the media moments. I just got a notification saying that F1 and FIA confirmed Bahrain to host 2025 pre-season testing. Wow, big news there. FP1. Like I said, I was back at college this week, and actually quite nicely, free practice fell in between my classes, so I wasn't actually in my classes for them, but that meant that I couldn't make my videos about them. And I couldn't watch with sound either because I was like walking around, so I was only keeping half an eye on free practice. And you know me, I love to watch my free practices. So I'm excited for after this little break that comes, because I think the next one, I can't remember where it is, but it's during the night, is it? A lot of crashes during free practices this weekend. Not always a bad thing, especially in a track like Baku, because it is the drivers finding their limits. Sometimes it's a bit of relief when you see your driver crash safely. Just have a little off in free practice, because you know that, I mean, at one hand, it could be like they might take it easier and be slower for the rest of the weekend, or they could just be, they found their limit, now they know, you know, that's how to do that lap. I feel like you just need to get the crash out of the way sometimes. So yeah, Charles was going strong all weekend. He was obviously quickest until that crash in FP1. And again with the Ferrari, Carlos was also just tapping the wall and going off a bit, finding their limits. Ferraris like to find their limits a lot in the free practices. Colapinto unfortunately had his crash in turn 4, and his teammate Alex very nearly had the same crash as well. Bottas had that great save in FP1 that unfortunately Ollie did not save in FP3, I think. Just, is it turn 1? I think it might have been turn 1, where you know you're not going to make it and you just have that second to turn the car before you hit the wall. And unfortunately Ollie hit the wall with his, but Bottas had a good save. And then the Alpine problems, because of course what else would be happening with an Alpine that wasn't a problem? Ocon, no power. Perez was looking rapid. Max still topped the session, but you could tell this is the Perez. This is the Checo back. And yeah, Leclerc's still in the top 10 though, after his crash on, and I think his fastest lap was on the mediums as well. And then Charles was very much not happy with his car in FP2. He said, I'm not driving with that car. And then he goes on to top the sessions. I feel like that's what you need to do. You need to complain about your car like Max does, and then just go fastest, because that seems to be a little trend in Formula 1. Max also had a great save. He was saying that the visibility was bad, which if you're watching the race, you could even see with the cameras, like you couldn't really tell what colour the car was from the higher angle, and the commentators like messed up a few times because you literally just couldn't tell which car it was until the lower angle came to show it. So visibility in Baku, not ideal. The sun was in Max's eyes. Yeah, Lando and Pierre had a bit of an issue. Pierre was struggling with his battery and he got in Lando's way and Lando wasn't happy. I think Lando gave him the finger because, like, you know, he ruined his lap and this is a sport and they're competitors. Quite normal behaviour, but a lot of people weren't happy with Lando for that. But at the end of the day, who cares at the same time? And then even Mercedes were looking good. Lewis was looking good as well in the free practices. More Alpine problems. Another red flag for Ocon. In FP3, obviously Behrman's crash. Free practice was also important because RB were running their new floor with Daniel for the first time because Daniel obviously didn't get the new floor last week, and they made some changes. They were looking strong in FP1, made some changes, looking a bit weaker, and weak again in qualifying, or weaker than expected, especially for Daniel. Yuki not too bad. And yeah, Russell, Leclerc and Norris topping the free practices. So free practices are always actually interesting to watch because you can't always tell a lot from what will happen over the weekend. I mean, in a track like Baku, because, you know, anything can happen and it's all about putting that perfect lap together in qualifying. Qualifying actually not as important as it is in some other tracks because of how easy, or the opportunities, I guess. It's not exactly an easy place to overtake, but the opportunities there is to overtake in Baku. And obviously we saw that with the likes of Lando starting P17 and finishing P4. I'm guessing everyone here has watched the race, right? Because sometimes I feel like I'm spoiling the race when I jump ahead. But like, let me know. I'm guessing everyone has watched the race and you just like want to debrief on it. You want to let me know your thoughts and hear my thoughts on it. So I'm not spoiling anything. It's like Drive to Survive. Don't tell me what happens in the end of the season. One of my friends, Sophie, she sort of watches Formula 1 just for Drive to Survive, and she's always like, don't tell me what happens in the end, like, don't spoil it on me. I'm like, it's a sport. I just love that, like, I'm up to date watching it every weekend, and she sees, like, some information every now and again, and is like, what? Like, sometimes I'll accidentally let it slip, like, because I think she might be a season behind. I let it slip, like, who someone's driving for, and she's like, what do you mean they're in that team? I find that so funny. Actually, her favourite track is Singapore, so I need to actually tell her that it's on this weekend in case she doesn't know. But I love that. You should just be able to love Formula 1 in the way that you love it, whether that's through Drive to Survive, whether it's through TikTok, watching every practice session, every qualifying, every race. Yeah, I think it's very important we just let people live and just love things the way that they want to, because how boring would it be if there wasn't that range, you know? Qualifying. Perez looking strong from the get-go. Definitely a bit of relief for Perez fans, because it is always difficult seeing your driver struggle, knowing the potential that they have and knowing that the team has now seen that they still have it, but there's just something that's not clicking every other weekend. So they need to find out how to make Perez the Checo at every single track. And a weekend like Perez had this weekend is really what he needs, maybe one that didn't end the way that it ended, to secure hopefully his seat for next year. Obviously he does have a contract, but we know contracts are made to be broken in Formula 1. But yeah, him and Carlos were fighting with each other all weekend. There was always something bound to be happening at the end of that. Obviously the biggest surprise from qualifying was Lando being out in Q1. There was the bit of drama over the yellow flag, white flag. Still don't know what the outcome of that actually was. It was that Ocon was going slow. A few of the drivers had passed Ocon going slow without a yellow flag, or just before the yellow flag, and then when Lando came around it was a yellow flag. So Lando, he boxed. He didn't finish his lap because he had slowed down anyway. I don't know how much he had improved on his lap anyway. And I think Daniel boxed as well. All the cars sort of there, they didn't really improve. So I think McLaren did bring that up as a problem, but it was obviously seen as necessary for the yellow flag to be out at that moment. So not much they could do now. My throat is going, guys. Joe was starting from the back of the grid anyway, so he was sort of trying to give Bottas that slipstream because obviously that slipstream is quite powerful at Baku. And it worked earlier on in the session, but I think potentially they just did it too early and the other cars had gone faster obviously at that point, so both stakes were out. And then Ocon had a puncture from the get-go, nada from Alpine, but big sleigh from Behrman and Colapinto into Q2. And then Q2, we were back to Max looking strong. Bearman ended up pushing Tsunoda out. Colapinto had a fantastic lap. He was like P12, I think, and he went to P5. And Bearman qualified Hulk in the end as well. Bearman was out. He was pushed... Who was he pushed out by? Alonso, maybe? But that was a very impressive qualifying for Bearman, up until then anyway. And then Q3 was the drama with Albon. A lot of people are like, how did they miss that? But they didn't miss it. If you watch the video from the garage, it was the release guy who tells the car when to go, let the car go. But the guy who was obviously in charge of taking the fan out was literally reaching for the fan as the car was pulling off. And he knew, he was like going after the car to get it off. So it wasn't like they just forgot to take the fan off. It was just that the car was let go too early and like the guy just hadn't gotten to take the fan off yet. I don't know whose fault that would be blamed at, if he didn't take it off early enough, or if, well, I guess the guy letting the car go probably should have checked that there was, like, the car was able to go. But yeah, that was a problem. He didn't get around in time to do a fast lap. He had to stop at the end of the pit lane to throw the fan off the car. He did it himself, so that's completely allowed. The team aren't allowed to interfere with the car. So if one of them came over, he probably would have been disqualified, but he did it himself, which was fine. Checo outqualified Max. Very iconic from Checo. Very good lap from Checo. Once again, I had such high hopes from him for this weekend. Colapinto outqualified Alex. Russell P4, Hamilton P7. And then Charles on pole. He had a 1 minute 41.365 lap time. Very good lap time. With Alonso in P8, the Williams were 9 and 10. And then Piastri just 3/10 behind Leclerc. Sainz 4/10 behind Leclerc. So Charles was that bit ahead, 3/10 from P2. And it was a bit closer from then, with Sainz only a 10th off of Piastri. But obviously Piastri being in P2 and Lando being in P17 was sort of a sight to see, especially given the whole week after team orders came into play. Obviously, again, not really Lando's fault being out in Q3, it was just Q1. Obviously, not Lando's fault being out in Q1, it was just, I get the nature of the sport, a lot of it is luck. But yeah, he definitely didn't look very positive after qualifying race. So there were a few pit lane starts. We had Lewis with a pit lane start, he had a setup change, and Ocon, he had a new engine, which he didn't disclose to the FIA. So he ended up in his pit lane start, and Joe was starting from the back anyway. A few drivers still have to take probably a new engine by the end of the season, so they'll have an engine penalty. So, oh yeah, Pierre was also disqualified from qualifying. Didn't mention that. Obviously, again, nothing he exactly did, just with the car, and how it didn't pass the FIA test, so he was starting from the back as well. So Pierre made it into Q2. So everyone who was out in Q1 got bumped up a place. I guess the main strategy, and are we going to talk about strategies in Baku, was the one stop was the favourite. I think everyone did a one stop unless... I think everyone did a one stop, right? The most popular strategy was to start on the mediums and go as long as you could, and then switch on to the hards for the end of it. And then it was a very interesting race for those who started on the hards, who were praying for a safety car the entire race. We'll talk about that when we get to that. So I think those who were starting on the hards was Ricciardo, Norris, Joe and Ocon. Alex was on the hard and Franco was on the medium. And they finished, there wasn't a huge difference between the overall strategy, if it was better to stop on the hards. Obviously, if there were more safety cars or whatever, the strategies might have changed. But in the end, it didn't really matter. It was probably a better strategy to start on the mediums in the end, because that's what most people were doing. But Alex did finish ahead of Franco, and Alex started on the hards. So Alex had a very impressive race. Yeah, if he didn't manage his tyres as well as he did, that wouldn't have been as successful. And obviously, Williams actually knew when to box him to change, and it all worked out for him. A very clean start. I was not expecting a clean start at Baku. Not with the way that the grid was lined up, not with one of the fastest cars, if not the fastest car on the grid right now, in P17, 16, 15 maybe, after he gets moved up a bit. And it wasn't a completely clean Start, I guess, with Stroll and Yuki, which ended both of their races in the end. Yuki's luck has been awful recently. That's 2 races in a row, right, that he's DNF'd. Not a great time for VCarb, especially with their new upgrades that they can't really tell if, like, just what's going on with that. There's also that move with Hulkenberg. I think Ricciardo Tsunoda was in it as well, and Norris. There were like 4 across at one point. Stroll obviously got the puncture with his little touch with Yuki. He fell to P20 before eventually retiring, and he had quite extensive damage. He went a lot longer than I thought he could be able to go on with. So he had to let Daniel pass and eventually got overtaken by the rest of the grid before he retired the car. A very good start for Leclerc, Piastri and Perez to keep it clean, but also for Charles to keep P1. I don't even think they touched. Like, I think Perez and Carlos might have got a little close to touching at the start, and Max, or was it Max and Carlos? I can't remember which one it was, but yeah, I'm impressed they kept it clean. I would have liked some more first lap action, and I just want one of those races where, like, safely something goes completely wild and like a midfield, like Hulk wins. Daniel started the race quite well. He's very consistent in his timings. He was doing timings of 1:49 and everyone around him was doing 1:50s, bar Lando, who was a bit in front. He was doing 1:49s as well. And then that pace just vanished for the rest of the race. Hulk had a great move on Behrman, and Hulk definitely had more of the Haas pace over the start of the race, but didn't really end like that. Both Haas's were looking really strong. And I think the first box came on lap 11, which is very, very early. And it was Colapinto boxing from mediums to hards. I was like, okay, so this is a 2-stop, because what do you mean the mediums can only last 11 laps? Obviously, when one person boxes, it's like a domino effect and everyone needs to box or else they'll get undercut. But the undercut wasn't extremely powerful at Baku. To take Daniel, who was on the hards, for example, he was lapping a second faster than those on the mediums by, around lap 11, lap 12. I'm sure it was the same for Gasly. After that, when everyone was on the mediums, who fell back behind the hard runners just completely fell out of the race. Basically, the grading was horrific on the hards, and the longer you went on the hards, actually the better it got, which we saw, which doesn't exactly make complete sense to me. I don't understand exactly how tires work, but I trust, because that's what VCarb were saying. The longer you go, the better it will get, Daniel. Very hard to trust that. The Ferraris did a very good job of holding off the Red Bulls, actually, this race. And also Gasly, I will say, was going really strong. I think he was probably the fastest hard runner bar Lando at that point. He's making some good overtakes. I think he did a better job at managing those hard tyres this race. And then Gasly had that move on Ricciardo and Russell, and he got in front of Russell, but he didn't make a stick, obviously. It's an Alpine versus a Mercedes at the end of the day, but that was a very brave move, and it was a good move from Gasly. And then I guess the thing we weren't expecting from this weekend was that Lando would be playing his role in team orders, and that is what happened. Lando held up Perez. He did a really good job at holding up Perez while Piastri boxed, so Piastri would come out ahead of Perez, and because of Lando, I think that did happen. Piastri did come out, so Lando definitely did play the team game this weekend. And he played the team game while having a great race himself, so even more impressive from Lando. And then, Piastri made that move on Charles on lap 20, which was definitely my favourite moment of the entire race. We also got to see Behrman's defence on Lewis Hamilton, out of everyone. And, before I forget, Colapinto made the post about, racing alongside Lewis Hamilton as well, which is so cute. I just love how, they're just racing, doing their careers with their idols. It's incredible. This was to the point where I realised that the people on the hards, Gasly, Ocon and Daniel, were absolutely relying on a safety car this entire race, because they were not boxing. The pit window for the people on hard tyres came and went, and they didn't box. Alex boxed, better decision at the end. A very clean race. Perez was sort of driving unreal. He was hanging on to Charles, and that Red Bull was not as fast as the Ferrari. So I don't know what part of Baku just brings something out of Checo, But if that part of Baku wants to travel to every other race this year, then we might get a different Checo. I think Ocon was the longest on his hard tyres actually, because I'm pretty sure Ocon like didn't even start on fresh hard tyres. Like I feel like his hard tyres might have been like a lap or two old anyway. Obviously we saw Lando's amazing recovery, good strategy as well from McLaren. Stroll retired a lot later than Yuki. I think Yuki retired about lap 16, 17, something like that, and obviously Stroll only retired near enough to the end. And then Charles started, and the fight between Charles and Piastri was going right until the end, but then unfortunately Charles just started to lose rear grip on his tyres completely. We saw that he couldn't get close to Piastri, and even if he did get closer, he couldn't get the traction to overtake him. So that was sort of Ferrari's hopes of getting that win for Charles at Baku gone. And then Charles, obviously slowing down, gave the opportunity for Perez and Carlos to catch up with him. Charles luckily stayed out of that mess. Perez and Carlos not so lucky. A lot of people blamed Carlos, and I did see it more as a racing incident, because how I looked at it was that it sort of looked like, to me, Carlos, they both stayed on the racing lines, yeah, but Carlos only swerved that much in front of Perez after Perez made contact with Carlos's wheel. That's what it looked like to me. But if you weren't focusing on that piece of contact, it would have just looked like Carlos completely crossed over in front of Perez. But then again, Perez kept in his racing line, so it was just a racing incident. It was just unlucky place, unlucky timing for them both. I mean, I definitely am glad I wasn't in the Red Bull garage when that happened, because say there was a bit of fury there from Christian's side, obviously with Max not really anywhere as well, and Lando also had that great overtake on Max. So the race ended under safety car, and just then, last lap of the race, all the hard runners decided to box. So Ocon, Gasly and Ricciardo, am I missing anyone there? Maybe one of the Saibas, did the entire race on the same set of hards and just boxed for softs on the last lap so they wouldn't be disqualified, because obviously you need to have two different tire compounds during the race. Not a good strategy at all. Like, they all boxed, they all came out, in the same order, because it's under virtual safety car anyway. So yeah, I guess when it's like that, it's sort of like a game of chicken when you're right beside each other. Daniel was pulling away from Ocon, but he was sort of keeping that 10 seconds from Pierre, so Pierre was keeping like 10 seconds ahead of Ricciardo at it. So it was sort of set in stone anyway, but I guess it was game of chicken on like who would box first, and none of them boxed until the virtual safety car. I wonder if anything would have changed if there was no virtual safety car. I keep getting Formula 1 notifications on my phone, and I'm just a little concerned that one is going to start with braking and I'll miss it. Yeah, Behrman finishing P10, Colapinto getting points as well. So the Williams has definitely improved recently. We can see that because, Alex was down at the back near Logan at some points too, but this is definitely very tough for Logan to watch, I'd say, seeing how well Colapinto's doing and how a lot of people probably aren't taking into consideration the improvement of the Williams, but also it hasn't improved that much, whereas it's easy for Colapinto to get into the Q3 in the top 10. So a big applause to Colapinto finishing P8. Very, very, very impressive, and it's sort of a crime that he doesn't have a seat for next year yet. There's still one Seba seat left, and there's still that Visa Cash App or BC. Maybe they won't go with Liam. Maybe they'll try get Franco instead. And then, yeah, a few infringements noted after the race. Max, Pierre, someone else, potentially Ocon or someone, basically for like overtaking under virtual safety car. Max just overtook to wave at Lando and to congratulate him, which is not allowed. You're not allowed to overtake under virtual safety car, but I guess it was the end of the race. They must have forgot about that, and it was just a warning in the end, so that was fine. And then yeah, McLaren also got a €5,000 fine also, and that was it. There was no other post-race penalties or anything like that, which was quite good. What else is there to talk about post-race? See, I debriefed on my TikTok live a lot, because it was more fun, like actually having live discussions with people. Is there a way to do lives on like YouTube? Because that might be fun as well. But obviously I'll still be doing my podcasts. Okay, I guess we should do Riddle of the Week now. So, The answer of this week's Riddle of the Week was Jochen Rindt. I've been pronouncing his name since I first heard of him for the last few years as Jochen Rindt, because obviously, once again, I just read about these people. Like, it's not very often I hear people say their names, but I was watching videos about him last night and F1 pronounced it Jochen Rindt, so I think that's right. And he's the answer. So he is the first and only, thank God, posthumous Formula 1 champion. So, champion who has won after they're already dead. Jochen is German. He was born in Mainz in Germany in 1942. And he did definitely become one of the most notable figures in Formula 1 history. He was quite a fearless driver and had quite a past. He was orphaned as an infant and he was raised in Austria. He developed a passion for speed from an early age, like many, and he sort of transitioned from ski racing to motorized racing with the help of his friend Helmut Marko. So yeah, his early career he competed in various different racing formats. He did the 1965 Le Mans 24 hours with Ferrari, which he won. And in Formula 1 he drove for Cooper and Lotus. He definitely had quite an aggressive driving style. Like I said, he had sort of a fearless driving style, but off track he was very charismatic, he was very well loved and a fan favourite, definitely. And yeah, he had some bad crashes, he had some injuries, but he became the most dominant force in the sport during this time. In 1970 he achieved his greatest dream by winning the Formula 1 World Championship, but unfortunately his career was cut short by a fatal crash at Monza during practice. It's always the practice crashes in Italy that get the best. And yeah, when he died, obviously, he had made such an impact in the early part of the season that no one could overcome his points, and he ended up winning the World Championship after his death. So yeah, he's definitely quite an iconic figure. I think I know all of there was a point where I knew every single Formula 1 driver championship by their year that they won, but I don't know if I could still do that. But I always know for some reason that Jochen was 1970. I think I know all of the 70, 80, 90, 50, 60. I think I know all of those. Yeah, that was Jochen Rindt. I don't think I'll get used to saying his name because I just pronounce it differently in my head. Once again, have I ever went an episode without apologising for my pronunciation of anything? Probably not. That's the end of today's episode. Singapore is this week. It's one of my favourite tracks. It's definitely one that I really very much want to go to. And I think it will be a good race. I think there'll be quite a bit of maybe media news about VCARB upcoming now. So that's definitely something to keep an eye out on. And yeah, I'll talk to you next Tuesday after the Singapore Grand Prix. Goodbye.